The Hill family has been associated with the Greeley Stampede since the 1970s.
I think Gary, between him and his brother Carl, did a tremendous amount out here at the park. They were both big contributors to the Stampede and supported the park wholeheartedly for many, many years.
They just go way back, and they clearly were part of building a really strong foundation that let the rest of us come along and build on.
In 1976, Carl joined the Stampede Committee and served for 5 years. One of his first projects was in '76 as part of the Colorado Centennial U.S. Bicentennial celebration.
Carl was absolutely involved. He wasn't a committee man that stood back and told everybody else what to do. He would come in and ask you questions. How do you think we could do this better? He was a hands-on guy and just a pleasure to work with.
Carl was named the 1999 Greeley Stampede Grand Marshal for his contribution to the success of the Stampede and his community impact. In 2000, Carl led the capital fundraising for the new Island Grove Event Center project.
Impetus for that building, the event center, was the Colorado Farm Show needed more indoor space for their big event. But what it's done for Island Grove is it's allowed us to do a lot larger and more events that bring more people not only to the park but to Greeley and Weld County.
In 1987, Gary Hill was elected to the Stampede Committee and served as the grounds chairman until 1989.
I had grounds a couple of years, and I took a lot in from him and what to do and how to get it done.
Going on the committee, I go on this retreat, and so Dave Markley and Gary Hill were buddies. Dave starts talking about his parade, and so they had staged this, and Gary stands up and said, "I'm sick and tired of hearing about your parade. This is a bunch of baloney." And Dave had planted a gun with a blank in it where they were sitting, and he pulls his guns out and shoots it. And I mean, our whole crowd was all ducking down. It scared the hell out of all of us.
One of Gary's biggest projects that is still in use today is the old Bucker fire truck.
Fire truck was gonna be kind of just sold off or, put out to pasture, and so they refurbished it and painted it all up, and it was really a lot of fun and a great parade item.
In 2002, Brett Hill took a Stampede leadership role and became the parade's trail boss.
Brett is very organized, laid back, and extremely, extremely helpful. So he did tons of stuff. I couldn't have done it without him, truly. And he and Julie have become a really important part of our lives. And as any committee person probably says, their trail boss was the best, but I know mine was.
The Greeley Stampede has benefited from the involvement of the entire Hill family for the past 50 years. Support from the Hill family has not been limited to just Carl, Gary, and Brett. That is why the Greeley Stampede is honored to induct the Hill family into the 2022 Greeley Stampede Hall of Fame.